G'day guys, it's the coach here, and in this video I'm going to talk about triumphs. So what is a triumph? A triumph is something that happens when you are building your list. Now, you can't select it in War Scroll Builder, you can't pay any points for it per se, but when you are sitting in front of your opponent and you are talking about your armies and you work out who has spent the most amount of points in their army. Let's say it's a 2,000 point battle. My opponent has chosen a list that's a value of 1,970 points. And let's say my army list is worth 1,940, for example. Now, in this situation, most players would have chosen an endless spell to maybe fill up the slot. Maybe they've paid 50 points for a command point. But a triumph is happening when you have a points difference between you and your opponent, and you get to roll on a table that's sitting in the General's Handbook, page 75 of the current General's Handbook 2020. And it is probably the most underutilized, underappreciated, but potentially one of the biggest benefits you can tap into. But it is random though. If you are building a list, you've just got to hope that your army is less points than your opponent. So what are a triumph and what happens? So I mentioned the situation. My opponent is 1950 with their points. I'm 1940, 50, whatever it might be. I've chosen not to take a command. I've not taken a command point, or maybe I have and I've still got spare points. It doesn't matter. What happens is I get to roll a dice using page 75 of the General's Handbook 2020. And depending on what happens on that D3, I'm going to get a once per battle benefit that I can apply. It doesn't have to be on a hero. I can use it wherever I want. If I happen to roll a 1 or a 2, or a 1 on a D3, depending if you're rolling a D3 or a D6, but if you roll a 1 on a D3, you will get something called Inspired, where basically once per battle, you can apply this benefit on a unit before you start their combat or their shooting attack. And when that happens, your unit gets to re-roll all of their attacks in that phase until the end of the phase. Now that becomes really powerful because first it's not just re-rolling ones. It's not one of your command point abilities. So even if my unit is away from a hero, I can still apply a benefit. There is no requirements of being wholly within or within a certain range or being near my general. It's literally I pick anything on the table and I can allow it to re-roll hits. What's really cool as well is if you happen to have an opponent that is maybe causing a -1 to hit, it's not successful hits because we know, according to my War Scroll, a hit on a 3. But with your -1, I would be essentially hitting on a 4. I can still re-roll any of the dice. So if I happen to have a unit that has, I don't know, mortal wounds on a 6 or a 6 does 2 damage or there's some type of unit benefit, I can actually re-roll all of my successes in an attempt to get more 6s. Obviously, I put my 6s to the side and I can re-roll the rest. So it's a term called fishing for 6s. So you're just going out there and trying to get as many 6s as possible. So that's one. If you happen to get number 2, it allows you to re-roll your wounds, your wound roll for, again, attacks made either in shooting or in combat. Now, that's really powerful because there's not a lot of ways in the game to buff your wounds, and there's not a lot of debuffs around as well. So if you have this attack that you really, again, you've got to choose the triumph before you start rolling the dice. It's not like you rolled a whole bunch of hitful successes and now you want to apply the triumph. It must happen when you choose the unit attacking in shooting or combat. But again, it allows you to re-roll your wound rolls. So again, you can stack this as well. So if you happen to want to use the re-roll ones to hit command ability and then apply Bloodthirsty, you could as well. So either way, you can really prepare an absolute damage attack, or maybe you've got some other things in your army, who knows, depending on what army you've got. Again, quite powerful. I really like that one as well. There's just not a lot of ways to either increase or debuff wounds. So being able to re-roll your wound roll is great. The last one, and one that I really like, and it saved me in a couple of games at a previous GT, was if I roll a 3, it's Indomitable. And what that allows you to do is it allows me to re-roll saves. Now, this becomes really powerful because there's a couple of things. First, it's better than Mystic Shield. I don't just re-roll ones, I can re-roll all saves. Second of all, I mentioned those modifiers. I can re-roll successes that would essentially become fails. So I can choose, and maybe with armor saves in your model, there's some models that if you roll a 6 on your armor save, it rebounds a mortal wound. I think Daughters of Cain bucklers, for example, the Star Drake, for example. There's a whole bunch of things that might rebound mortal wounds back on a successful armor save. So this actually, again, might allow you to increase that ability by fishing for 6s or fishing for 1s or whatever it might be. But the other thing as well is there is a command ability called All Out Defense, and that allows you to reroll armor saves of 1 in combat only. So the situation that I'm thinking about, I had my Mega Gargants up against the Ossiarch Bone Reaper catapults. They do a lot of damage. They do 5 wounds per shot with a failed armor save. So they've got no rend. So it's just either basically you pass, or a 5-wound hero is dead, or it's just flat damage. So, being able to re-roll those saves became really powerful and, really reduced the amount of damage that I took. So again, as I mentioned, Triumph is something that sits in the General's Handbook. It's page 75 of the General's Handbook 2020. It is something that is random, so I can't choose if I take Inspired, Bloodthirsty, or Indomitable, and nor is there a guarantee on if I'm even going to get one. Most people, when they have 50 points remaining in their army list, will take the command point every day of the week. But I'm actually now deciding, and the tournament that I'm talking about, Vic GT, that I just came 8th out of 70 odd players, is my army list was 1950 of 2,000 points, and nobody had an army less points than I did. So when you start creeping into your army list of 1970, 1980, 1990, the chances of getting a Triumph is pretty slim to none. But when you start going around 1940, 1930, 1950, 1960, there's a pretty good chance that you might get yourself a Triumph. So, I joke about that on this show, and, on my dice bag, it says, don't forget your Triumph. One of the things that often happens is when you really need it, you often forget about it. So make sure you get yourself a token, make sure if you get a little reminder, a post-it note, or something that when you're in the heat of the battle and you've got re-roll all to hit or wound or saves, that you remember it in the heat of the battle at that right time, or you choose that right model that really needs to hit or to wound or save. So that is what a Triumph is, and I hope you found that useful. I hope you found that discussion valuable. If you did, give the video the old thumbs up. And if you have a comment or an insight, leave it in the comment section below. The champions over here are my AOS Coach Patreons and YouTube members. So you guys are bloody legends. Thank you for all the support. If you want to know more about the support programs, the links are below down here in the episode description, along with a link to the Discord server, so we can continue this conversation. Until next time, don't forget to name your characters and have a good one.